Hello, Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, a year ago tonight, Hurricane Laura made landfall in Cameron Parish, beginning a disastrous trail that would take it through Lake Charles and toward Texas while devastating much of southwest Louisiana. Tonight, we will look at the recovery or lack thereof. Other than winds, viruses and floods have also created havoc in current time. For historical perspectives, we will hear from the author who wrote books about the 1918 influenza and the 1927 Great Flood. Two rivalries, one between New Orleans and Plaquemines parishes over port expansion, and the other about the lucrative contract to upgrade the New Orleans Convention Center, are also in the news. Those stories, plus eyeing Hurricane Ida out in the Gulf, and wondering how much better prepared are we then from when Katrina hit, are subjects for tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Stephanie Grace, columnist, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. John Barry, author of the books The Great Influenza, the story of the deadliest pandemic in history, and Rising Tide, the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927 and How It Changed America. And there's Tony McCauley, reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. All right, we're going to go first on over to John. And the coronavirus, we see the surge now with the Delta variant. And, of course, you took a very, very close look at what happened over 100 years ago now, 1918 influenza pandemic. What have we learned from that pandemic 100 years ago to try to get us out of this pandemic situation?
Well, there are certainly parallels, not only from 1918, but from every one of the pandemics that we know about in detail. That would be 1889, 1957, 1968, even 2009. All of them, as a virus was in a new host, humans, and all of them, the disease got more transmissible and usually a little bit more virulent before it got better. So the question is where we are on the evolutionary scale right now with Delta. And honestly, nobody can answer that question. There's a best case and a worst case, of course. One of the key issues is whether or not this virus can escape the immune protection you get either from infection or from a vaccine. I think the answer is pretty clear that the protection does diminish over time, that the virus over time, but a long time, we're talking about years, probably would escape, and therefore you would probably continue to need updated shots as you do with influenza. It's not clear whether you need one annually. It's also pretty clear that in a couple of months, we're going to have probably 90%, if not more than 90% of the population either vaccinated or having natural immunity since they've already been infected and recovered. Then the issue is what will happen next. If we get another variant that's pretty nasty, things could get worse. I think nobody really wants to make the call, but I think most people expect things to calm down significantly, but we could still have a rough time before we get there.
So this virus, the coronavirus, it's not going to go away in all of its different variants.
Yeah.
And they're just going to keep evolving, just as viruses have done forever.
Right.
So we need to deal with it. We do have something working for us at this time, and that is the vaccine. That's an important part of our arsenal against this, isn't it?
It's the single most important, but it's not the only thing. All those public health measures you can take to protect yourself and others, they work. They've been demonstrated to have worked remarkably well in places that actually adhered to them. The problem is when people don't adhere to them. Mm-hmm. But they can keep it in a box and in combination with vaccines. But the vaccines are the single most important. I think coming down the pike, but we don't have them yet, will be some drugs that will have impact on the disease after you get infected. originally there was expectation that we would have them before we got the vaccine, but that early optimism didn't pan out.
John, when was the last of the 1918 virus? How long did it last?
Until 1957, when it was replaced by another pandemic virus. But what happened is probably, but nobody knows for certain. But number one, I think the virus continued to mutate, and it mutated in the direction of most influenza viruses toward mildness. In addition, and equally important, if not more important, the immune system became used to seeing it. So the 1918 virus, like SARS-CoV-2, could infect cells deep in the lung, which made it very dangerous. But that takes a while for that infection to develop, particularly with COVID-19. And if you're vaccinated, you can fight that off. The new Deltas, your viewers probably know, has as much as 1,200 times the viral load in the upper respiratory tract. It's becoming an upper respiratory tract virus. It still can infect the lung. If you're vaccinated, and the reason the people who are dying are almost exclusively unvaccinated, vaccinated people, their immune systems can stop it from doing much damage in the lung and elsewhere in the body. And the unvaccinated people don't have that protection.
So, John, could you just sort of briefly explain, I mean, what are we doing? And we've got the vaccine, you talk about development of drugs, but we also have to try to remain a step ahead, if it's at all possible, of these viruses. In terms of COVID-19, are we revisiting what happened and what we can do to make it better in the future?
Yeah, there's a lot of people looking at that. There's the UK is establishing a commission. The European Union is doing that. In the United States, there's some political pushback about the idea of establishing a commission, but I think it's likely that an independent commission funded by several major foundations will be established. It will be run by the same person who ran the 9/11 Commission, which was praised by pretty much everybody. And we're going to have a very serious look about the response, both last year, ongoing, origins, things you can do in the future in terms of surveillance and lab safety, so that, I mean, there will be other viruses that jump species. The question is how well we respond to them.
Okay, we'll be looking for that. Thanks a lot, John. Now let's go on over to Stephanie. And Stephanie, I mean, Lake Charles a year ago, Hurricane Laura devastated it. If they are still having such a hard time.
They really are. I went last week to check it out, and you drive into town, and what do you see? Blue tarps. So anyone who went through Katrina, that era, knows what that's about and knows what it's about to have blue tarps a year later. August 27th to them is what August 29th is to us. It's the day the worst happened, and here we are again. And what's happened since is that, of course, they were hit by Laura last year, a year ago today. That was a Category 4, 150-mile-an-hour winds. I spoke to the parish administrator in Calcasieu Parish, and he said, if you had designed a storm to cause maximum damage in Calcasieu, you would have designed this storm. It was that powerful. The mayor of Lake Charles calls it like equivalent to a 30-mile wide tornado. 6 weeks later, they get another hurricane, Delta, which wasn't as powerful, but again, on the heels of this devastation. Then remember when Texas had that horrible freeze? That hit Lake Charles too. That was February. And then in May, they had one of these freak rainstorms where the 1,000-year rain, up to 17 inches of rain. And again, think about it. People were starting to do repairs over and over and over again. The people who had the wherewithal to do repairs. One of the big problems is a lot of people are not back. They don't have the money. Their insurance shortfalls. That's always the case. This is all in the middle of COVID, so you had all the supply chain issues, and remember how much building supplies went up. The cost of them, insurance doesn't cover that. So what they're trying to do is basically get a package from Congress that would be equivalent to what enabled the road home in Louisiana, in New Orleans, HUD money, separate from FEMA money. FEMA money you get automatically. HUD money you have to get Congress to approve. And that means it's political. And there's tremendous finger pointing. Both Presidents Trump and Biden say they support it. Members of the delegation support it. No one seems to know why it hasn't moved yet. There's a lot of kind of something's going on. There's political gamesmanship talk. The congressman from the area, Clay Higgins, is someone who is, I'd say, skilled at the outside game of politics, of the kind of performance side of it, not very skilled or experienced at the inside part of getting an appropriation. We have other members in the delegation who are working hard on it.
Well, Stephanie, let me ask you, is the infrastructure bill, is there anything in there for the infrastructure? I mean, we saw photo ops.
We did. That's the bridge. That's separate. Yeah. And what's interesting, a lot of people ask, Bill Cassidy was one of the negotiators in that. Why didn't he allow for that? Well, he was going for money for that bridge, which also needs to be rebuilt. That's not a Laura issue. It needs to be rebuilt anyway. And they got it. And, that was such a carefully crafted deal among senators from both parties. They were trying to keep the costs down, frankly. They were trying to have it be a pure infrastructure bill. And I think the idea is if you kind of let one locality get their issue on, then every state has their issue. And this is just, so they kind of made a rule that none of that money would not be attached to this bill. Traditionally, that money like this is attached to appropriations bill. And we're kind of coming up in the season when the appropriations bills are passed. So there is some expectation that it will be September, October. But that's just a really long time to wait. And again, when you talk to local officials, they need people back. They don't have a labor force. They're worried about what's going to happen to neighborhoods that are untouched. Or if you say you rebuilt your house, but you're surrounded by houses that have not been touched, what happens to your home, your neighborhood, the value in your home, all of the things. I mean, we know all of these things.
Sure.
This all happened in Katrina. But and the other piece of it is Lake Charles is not New Orleans, and we're in an era now where these things happen so much more frequently than they did even 15 years ago. The country kind of rallied around New Orleans after Katrina. They really feel like they're forgotten. They don't have celebrities to have telethons. It's not a place a lot of people have visited or want to visit. It doesn't kind of hold a place in the country's imagination. It's just a place where people live, like most places in this country, and they really are feeling
they're feeling
forgotten and left out, and it's rough because they're working incredibly hard to come back, and we wish them
all the luck. Really,
wow.
we feel for them. Really,
yeah.
As we this Louisiana coast is in jeopardy again.
I think the rest of the world, New Orleans was like when you hear stories about Venice flooding.
Yeah.
It's the town the whole world is drawn by.
Right.
And they really care, but they may not care if Genoa's flooding.
Right. And then in someplace else floods another week, and again we have the wildfires. We have Tennessee now with the flooding. I mean, just so many things.
A lot of stuff to contend with.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Steph. Tony, let's go on over to you right now. And the port controversy. I'll let you take it from there between Plaquemines and Port Nola.
Right. Well, the first thing is that people agree that what's needed is a downstream container port because there's fantastic competition in the Gulf to get the spillover business from China. All of the world trade is moving towards container ports, and if we're not going to lose out to Houston, and particularly Mobile, Alabama, which has been growing by leaps and bounds in the last decade, Port Nola needs a downstream port to be able to handle these big ships that come up the river but can't go past the Crescent City connection because they're too big. Where that port's going to go has been the controversy. Most of the weight is with Port Nola building its new container facility in St. Bernard Parish Port. They've got the governor behind it. They had the St. Bernard Parish president behind it when they announced it last December. But all of a sudden they found a lot of blowback from the residents of St. Bernard who are worried about the impact to their community, putting a huge port there where none existed before, and all of the traffic. They expect hundreds, perhaps thousands of trucks daily coming in and out of that port as that facility would grow. So one that's also been talked about is the Plaquemine Parish, about 30 odd miles down the river, further down the river. that was kind of not getting all that much momentum, but they took the opportunity of the controversy of the St. Bernard one to jump in and get the parish is actually the overseer in Plaquemine. They have the oversight of the port there, which is different than St. Bernard Parish, where the parish council has no say over it essentially. So the parish there approved $50 million to do some rail improvements for the Plaquemine one, and they announced that they had secured some land to move ahead with their facility, and they've got one of the biggest container port companies in the world that's currently partnering with them for that one. So that's put Port Nola on the back foot a bit for this $1.5 billion project that they were hoping would be, would have everyone's backing.
So while these ports are, as we describe them, sister ports, there still is a little bit of rivalry in there too, it sounds like.
There's a lot of rivalry. Yeah, they're sister ports, and they're all independent subdivisions of the state, but they all have their own imperatives. Like I mentioned, they have different oversight bodies. In St. Bernard Parish, the parish voted unanimously under the pressure from the citizens' movement against it. They voted unanimously to block the port, even though they have no power to do so. That was the politics of it. Whereas the Economic Development Council, the person who runs that in St. Bernard Parish, came out for it just this week, and a lot of the business interests in the parish are for it. And for Plaquemine, then the parish actually does have oversight for it, and they see it as a big economic boon, so they're backing it. But and also, that particular port, the Plaquemine one, is not in a residential area at all, so they don't have any of the kind of pushback they've got at St. Bernard Parish.
Right. Well, of course, ports are a very important part of our economy, so this will be interesting to see how it all develops. Thanks a lot, Tony.
For sure.
Errol, over to you. And we got to talk about the sad news facing us right now, Hurricane Ida, and it is a hurricane.
I think a lot of people who were around here when Katrina came are seeing some eerie similarities. One being that it was a Friday afternoon, an overcast Friday afternoon, when people first started hearing that it was approaching that weekend. The Saints had a preseason game that weekend, and it was at home, and the Saints have a preseason game. So all these things, they're just kind of adding up.
And it's the same date, August 29th.
August 29th, I know, 16th anniversary.
The same date, yeah. So anyway, it makes people think about it. I guess it's about anything that's going to make people feel about Katrina. But I tell you, every year when there's an anniversary, I usually talk to some expert, and I always ask the same question. If there's another Katrina with the exact same conditions, will we have the same results? And they all say, no, the things have changed a good bit physically in terms of the levee system, in terms of the drainage system, and all this, even a lot of the governmental infrastructures. I think a good example is if you go into Lakeview along Bel Air Drive off of West Harrison Avenue, and between Bel Air Drive and the Hammond Highway, go down there, and at 34th Street was where the levee broke. And there's a little bit of a monument there, and you see the houses, a lot of high-rise houses that have been rebuilt. I always look for the tree that actually had a car in it. But what's really impressive, though, impressive in a kind of physical sort of way, is the structure that was built. I always call it Hoover Dam, this big flood control type of structure that was built. And so when the 17th Street Canal broke, and that's really when it all started, when it broke and went down 34th Street. Yeah, when all of that broke, there's a lot of prevention for that. And so the whole area, according to the authorities, the people who know better, is just a lot better protected than it was. A big area, of course, was within the 9th Ward. There's much better levee protection. So all along the line, as you go across the 6 Mile Bridge and the barriers, but even things like FEMA, that FEMA just went overhaul with its regulations. For example, before Katrina, FEMA had to wait until it got approval from authorities to come in and start setting up shop and doing things. Now they can make the call when they want to, that they see if there's an emergency coming, that they start moving in. I think in our own everyday lives, laptops were really new at the time, and iPhones, and of course now they're part of everyday life, and so the communications will be a lot better too.
Right, texting, we weren't too sure about texting, particularly we of the older type, so, but we all know how to text now. Okay, Dee, I got to move along, but oh gosh, we certainly are not happy about this, about a visit from Ida anywhere along the coast. All right, Tony, let's go over to you real quick, too, because there's yet another controversy, and this one is regarding a contract with the convention center upgrades. Now, the convention center board approved one, but it's probably going to be challenged.
Yeah, there's big money involved, and as is often the case, there's controversy, and in this case, likely lawsuits. It's more than $500 million contract. There were three groups involved in the bidding. It went to an out-of-state led consortium, AECOM Hunt, together with a local junior partner, Broadmoor. They had no DBE. No black-owned businesses prominently involved, not as partners. That was one controversy. The whole way the selection went, under this new state law for bidding contracts that allows for other than the lowest bidder to be picked. Basically, 5 people select their favorites. That became a topic of controversy, particularly around one of the judges that was that the losers alleged had ulterior motives or biases towards one of the winning bidders. Mm-hmm. And so it went. They decided to override, the board, that is, of the convention center, decided to override all that controversy and give it to the original selection, but the two losers have threatened lawsuits. So it's all part of that big $1.5 billion revamp of the convention center and the surrounding area. They're going to build a whole neighborhood. It's all been contentious, every element of it, and it's there's a lot of money involved, obviously, and
that's projects, how much money. How much money in this contract?
This one is overseeing just over $500 million, $557 million of upgrade projects for the convention center.
And this is going to be actually of the building itself of the convention center to make improvements to existing building?
Yeah, that's right. A lot of internal improvements. They've already done some of it. They've put in that park along the front and the transportation center. The most visible improvement will be a big glass structure in the middle of it, which mm-hmm. will allow the convention goers to see the Mississippi River. You can't really see anything in the current structure, so that'll be the most visible and dramatic addition.
Okie-doke. And that's a good transition back over to John, talking about the Mississippi River, which, of course, is the reason why New Orleans is here. You wrote the book about the 1927 flood, the way it changed America. How did it change America?
That's
briefly.
There's a whole book about that.
In 30 words or less, after I've written the book about it. And the book, of course, is Rising Tide, which is a great book.
It had, tremendous impact on, American demographics, American politics. I think it changed the way people viewed the role of the federal government, obviously locally. It changed the way engineers viewed all rivers, not just the Mississippi. In terms of where we are now facing Ida, as you may recall, I did serve for 6+ years on the post-Katrina Flood Protection Authority. I think the system will perform as designed. It will meet the 100-year standard, which is, I think we all know, is a very, very low standard. Mm-hmm. I was looking at the latest projections just before I came on, and it does not, these things change very rapidly, as we all know. But right now, it doesn't look like any of the surge would overtop the levees. I think one of the biggest improvements is that in the new system, they will withstand overtopping. They'll continue to function. They won't, quote, fail to ground, unquote. So you're not going to get a big hole in the levee system where water just roars through, even if you did get overtopping. But again, in this hurricane, as of now, it does not look like that will happen.
So, back to 1927 and that flood, for flood protection, the Mississippi River was levied, which of course has had an impact on our coast.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. That's, one of the main reasons for coastal land loss, probably the single biggest reason, although there are certainly others, including activities of the oil industry. natural.
Right. It was
The word that I'm looking for.
yeah. Well, the river built the delta, and that was just
Right.
interfered with right there. As the silt wasn't heading down the river to build that delta, and of course the state has a big plan, the coastal master plan, to try to rebuild
Right.
land, which of course that too is full of controversy. So you feel confident with this hurricane risk reduction system post Katrina that
Well,
the Corps did? It was like $14 billion into that thing.
Right. I'm confident that it will function as designed. That's what I'm confident of.
Okay.
There are areas that are actually below the 100-year standard because of subsidence.
And John,
Yeah.
as a result of the flood, didn't we see the implementation of the floodgate system like in Morganza and in Bonnie Carré, and hasn't that proved to be a big success
Well,
over
certainly,
time?
yeah, without a doubt. That outlet, Bonnie Carré is one of the engineering. The idea was they couldn't contain the river within levees. Before 1927, they believed levees alone would control it. They realized that was not possible. So the new design actually, even in 2011, there was almost 10,000 square miles of land that was flooded by design. By design. People don't realize that. That's a lot of land
A lot.
to accommodate the river, plus the outlet that, as you just mentioned.
Okay, well, certainly we want to share that confidence with you in our new risk reduction system. And real quick, guys, around the table, other stories, real quick. E.
Yeah, arrest today in the tragic murder of Everett Briscoe, the New Orleans policeman in Houston. 2 people arrested. The district attorney did not use the word allegedly. She was saying it's like these are the guys, and she did hint at the possibility of capital punishment.
Really tragic. Stephanie, over to you.
We don't get Jazz Fest, unfortunately, this fall, but there will be music. A few different organizations are setting up concerts. New Orleans and Company, a series of concerts at clubs that COVID safe. Crew of Red Beans is doing kind of a raffle where you can win a small backyard concert, pay the musicians.
So the music goes on, thank
Yes.
goodness. All right, Tony, real quick to you.
Wow. Stephanie just stole mine.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Within that, there's one that I noticed, which I thought was good, is that the NOLA by NOLA venues that's coming as a kind of dispersed replacement of Jazz Fest is going to include bringing back the Joy Theater for the first
wonderful.
time since the pandemic. They got 4 gigs lined up. So.
Good, thanks a lot. Over to
Under
you,
new
John.
owners.
Wrapping us up real quick. John?
I think we've already covered it. I wish everybody well
Yeah, well,
for this weekend. I think
and-
that's the most important thing at the moment.
and we all join in you with that. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Y'all be safe. Thank you all for watching. Everybody stay safe, and we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.